Oaxaca, Capital of History, is a video composed of the images most representative of our city of Oaxaca. Its aim is to allow citizen and visitor alike to share a small part of that which amazed them during their stay in La Verde Antiquera, with those yet unacquainted with this human cultural heritage site, as Oaxaca was designated in 1981 by UNESCO.
Oaxaca is the heir of the Mixtec Zapotec culture, and its origins go back to pre-Columbian times. It was founded in 1486 by the troops of Aztec Emperor Ahuitzotl and named Oaxaca, which means place of the Huaches. A fortress was founded on the 14 hill where, with the passage of time, the citizens of Oaxaca and its surroundings began to meet in a series of events now called Mondays on the Hill. At present, national visitors and foreigners come at the end of July each year to admire the premier folkloric festival of the Oaxaqueños, the Guelaguetza. Regional folk dances, characteristic of each of the 7 regions into which the state of Oaxaca is divided, are presented at this grand festival.
is the heart of the city because from there diverge the 8 most important streets and because there, Oaxacans and visitors meet to enjoy the evening musical performances of the state band playing immortal themes of Oaxacan music and classical melodies. Those who desire to hear marimba music will be delighted with Las Medeiros that sing with the voice of a woman, the state marimba.
To the west of the Zócalo is found the Portal de Mercaderes, which in past times was called Portal de Estrella, for a rich merchant of the same name, and Portal de Quiñones, because a teacher of young Benito Juarez lived there. Today it is a place to enjoy refreshing beverages and food.
To the north is located the Marqués de Valle Hotel, an impressive building that was reconstructed after a voracious fire suffered when it was the property of Archbishop Guilo.
To the east is the Portal of Flores Magón, where today important political figures and tourists gather to take pleasure in the gaiety of the Zócalo. At one time it was called Portal del Señor because there was a figure of Christ in a niche, which was venerated during Holy Week.
To the south, you will find the state government building whose construction was initiated on April 18, 1539, during the time of Viceroy Martin Martinez. After multiple reconstructions as a result of strong earthquakes through the years, it was finally inaugurated April 18, 1950, by the President of the Republic, Miguel Alemán, and the Governor of the state, Licenciado Eduardo Vasconcelos. In the central part of the facade, you will find our patriotic symbols, the flag and the Bell of Dolores.
In 1979, Interim Governor General Eliseo Jimenez Ruiz authorized artist Arturo Garcia Bustos to paint an impressive work of art in front of the principal staircase representing the history of Oaxaca in 3 murals. On the left, there are images of the Mixtec Zapotec culture, in which we can observe the daily life of the peasants, weavers, jewelers, priests, and the governing class, as well as the representation of the myth of the origin of the Mixtecs.
In the central mural on the left, we see people of the Isthmus of Tehuantepec with their traditions and customs. The central axis of the mural is an indigenous mother with a child, symbolizing the hope of the future. On the extreme right are the important figures of our independence, with Vicente Guerrero in front. Also depicted is the arrival of printing and the press. The Reform era is represented through the faces of Morelos, Margarita Maza, Benito Juarez, and Ricardo Flores Magón.
The mural on the right shows aspects of colonial life, the height of the construction of great buildings, and the production of cochineal for the textile industry. Because of its regal Doric architecture, the building emanates an air of authority. One feels so solitary admiring the impressive columns and walls of green quarry stone made to resist earthquakes and the passage of time. The building is constructed on 2 levels with 3 connecting patios. The neoclassic arches that surround them form an imposing architectural element which dominates the entire panorama.
At the end of the 16th century, the Jesuits arrived in the valley of Oaxaca and constructed this beautiful church called La Compañía, which is located at one side of the state government building. Its floor plan is based on a Latin cross, and the buttresses are supported by means of crypto-collateral chapels. The church is open at present, and the faithful attend to obtain the holy water of Sant Ignacio, which is famous for its curative powers. The facade is of Baroque style in two parts, on which stands out the sculpture of Sant Ignacio of Loyola. Above two empty niches we see monograms formed by the letters of Jose and Maria. On a different level, the atrium is surrounded by a grating of wrought iron. To the left of the facade at the entrance to an interior patio, very antique carved stones can be seen which were used as drainage tube connections during the earliest times of the city of Oaxaca.
This church, located on the corner of the 20th of November and Aldama, was constructed on the site of an indigenous temple. Initially, it was dedicated to Saint Catalina Martyr. In the interior, we can see depictions of Friar Bartolomé de las Casas protecting the indigenous, the baptism of the Zapotec king Cosihuesa, and the miracle of the cross of Huatulco. This history tells us that an ancient cross was worshipped in Huatulco around 1587. A pirate named Thomas Candich tried to destroy it by various methods without success. Later it was sent for by the Bishop of Oaxaca, Don Bartolomé de Ledesma. The wood was then made into crosses, one of which was sent to the Vatican and one each to the cathedrals of Mexico, Puebla, and Oaxaca, where they can be admired today.
There is also a painting referring to the Martyrs of Kahuna, an event which occurred in 1700 in San Francisco, Cajonos, where indigenous people were engaged in idolatrous practices in the house of the cacique. For that reason, Juan Bautista and Jacinto de los Santos were sent to investigate. The two were detained and assassinated by the heretics. The Spanish authorities investigated and condemned 15 guilty indigenous persons, whose heads were displayed on stakes in the region as a lesson to others.
San Juan de Dios was a church and convent in 1700, but today only the church remains. The 20th of November market was constructed on the site of the convent. In the market, visitors can discover a great variety of services and products, such as the small food stands and restaurants with black, yellow, and green mole, enchiladas, entomatadas, chichilo, and pipián. There are also delicious breads, pan de yema, pan amarillo, resobado, and marquesote, which can be enjoyed dunked in chocolate, coffee, or milk.
Entering the Miguel Cabrera Street entrance to the market, we find exquisite meats grilled on charcoal stoves, which the diner can enjoy accompanied by onions, chorizo, and vegetables. To drink, there are fruit-flavored waters, traditional beverages such as tepache and tejate, and sodas.
Crossing the street, one finds the Benito Juarez market, where many different artisans gather to exhibit their products for the more demanding buyer. The market was inaugurated with the name Porfirio Diaz on April 2nd, 1894. Here can be found rebosos, huipiles, belts and leather bags, delicious ice creams of all flavors, cheese, quesillo, chocolate, flowers, regional sweets, traditional and dress clothing, guitars, toasted grasshoppers, totopos, and tlayudas. In short, the market is what a typical Oaxacan market is understood to be, with products that cannot be found in a modern supermarket.
The Cathedral of Oaxaca is located in the center of the city. Its architecture is imposing. Construction of the cathedral was begun around the year 1537, and without being completed, it was consecrated on the 12th of July, 1733, by Friar Francisco Calderon de Santiago. It is of the 17th century Triptych-style Baroque.
The main entrance has a series of high reliefs. Surrounded by angels and cherubim, the Virgin of the Assumption is depicted being crowned by God the Father and Jesus Christ. In the highest part, the Holy Spirit is represented by a dove. The apostles are also seen with upturned faces.
The towers are not the originals, which were destroyed by the earthquake of 1931. The clock was a gift of Spanish King Ferdinand VII. The chandeliers were cast in Florence, Italy. The sculptural group in the presbytery has pieces brought from Greece, and the image of the Virgin of the Assumption was cast in polished bronze and made by the hands of the Italian Tarolini. El Señor del Rayo is devotedly worshipped. According to legend, a church was struck by lightning and was totally engulfed in flames, but miraculously, this figure of Christ remained intact among the ashes, except for a darkening of his color. Also in the cathedral is found the cross of Huatulco, whose history we already know. In the choir there is a gigantic pipe organ, which was constructed in the city of Oaxaca in 1690.
The Virgin of Forgiveness is in the entrance to the cathedral, and in the eastern part, the Virgin of Charity. At her sides are St. Peter and St. Paul, and above the Virgin in the center, the Holy Spirit is represented. On the south side of the cathedral, we see St. Rose of Lima and a leaded glass window representing the image of the Virgin Mary.
The Alameda of Leon is located in front of the cathedral and carries the name of Don Antonio de Leon, who was a Oaxaqueño, distinguished by heroic actions in honor of his country. He was born in Huajuapan in 1794 and died in the Battle of Molino del Rey in 1847. He was governor of the state of Oaxaca for short periods on 4 occasions between 1823 and 1845.
The Mixtec historian, Don Genaro Lagaria Coro, wrote Leon's biography and arranged the erection of his 4.5-meter high statue in the Alameda, whose trees were planted during Leon's lifetime. At the present time, daily homage is paid to the national flag at 8 o'clock in the morning and at 6 o'clock at night in the Alameda. Also, it is the site of the burning of the school flag ceremony every February 24th. In addition, the Alameda is a lovely place during the day and evening for walking and buying arts and crafts.
The State Department of Tourism is housed in an imposing building built entirely of green quarry stone, on whose front can be seen the official coat of arms of the state and of the city government of Oaxaca. In 1700, it was a school for girls under the administration of Bishop Domingo Sariña. Its purpose was the education of young girls in the jobs appropriate to their stations in life. The school was closed by reform laws and reopened in 1866 by order of General Porfirio Diaz.
Fairly recently, the building was the site of the Anthropology and History Museum. As proof of this, there still remains an enormous monolithic stone belonging to the Mitla ruins. Later, the municipal building was located here until about 1992, when the offices responsible for the dissemination of information about our tourist attractions were installed by order of Governor Diodoro Carrasco.
The Federal Building. This building was the residence of the bishops of the Antiquera diocese and was constructed in the 16th century. In 1812, upon the arrival of Morelos, it was abandoned by Bishop Antonio Bergosa y Jordan, and a cannon foundry was installed under the direction of General Manuel Terán. Since 1902, it has contained public service offices. It has also been the post office, the telegraph office, a dominical school of adult education, a school of fashion, a finishing school, and a teacher's college.
The governor of the state sent the first telegraph message on January 19, 1868, to the President of the Republic, Benito Juarez, initiating the communications era. Today, this site is the Federal Building, with the offices of Fishing and Environment, the Federal Attorney General, Communications, and Transportation.
In 1683, this building was donated by Bishop Thomas of Monterroso for the installation of the Pontifical Seminary of Santa Cruz. After 1862, it was occupied by the Arts and Sciences Institute of Oaxaca. In 1955, while Miguel Cabrera was governor, it was converted into the Benito Juarez University. Don Francisco Ortiz was its first director, and it obtained its autonomous status during the governorship of Fernando Gómez Sandoval.
The honor of having been the first attorney to earn a law degree from the university belongs to Benito Juarez Garcia, who later became the university's director. Law, pharmacology, bookkeeping, and high-school courses were studied at the school. As the demand for courses and the number of students grew, the university decentralized, leaving in the original building the law school and the School of Social Sciences.
The tourist corridor. Right at the corner of this university building, Macedonia Alcala Street begins. This beautiful tourist corridor was inaugurated on November 29, 1985 by the then governor Pedro Vasquez, giving a total change to the appearance of the city and masterfully coordinating the styles of the existing buildings and blending their colors. Also, the corridor was closed to vehicular traffic, creating an atmosphere of security for the tourists who calmly walk along, examining the shop windows of the merchants, looking for arts and crafts, books, and food to buy. In an artist's garden named in honor of Antonia La Bastista, a female collaborator of Benito Juarez and Porfiria Diaz, tourists can buy paintings and appreciate the talent of painters and portraitists. Also available in La Batista are arts and crafts and sarapes. This water outlet of green quarry stone dates from the 18th century. On one occasion it was reconstructed and has remained proudly intact throughout the passage of time.
The convent of Santa Catalina was donated by Friar Bernardino de Albuquerque in 1571. The convent was to be constructed to serve the needs of the nuns in their charitable services. Authorization was requested of Pope Pius, and it was in 1572, on the 15th of October, that Pope Gregory XII gave the authorization. The construction was directed by Friar Domingo Hernando de Cavarcos, who also constructed the Santo Domingo de Guzman complex and the convents of Tepozcolula, Yanuitlan, and Coixtlahuaca in the Mixteca at the end of the 16th century.
Beginning in 1862, the convent served as a public jail, and at the turn of the last century it was converted to the city government offices of Oaxaca, and the clock, which still remains, was installed on the 20th of March 1976. President Luis Echeverria and Oaxacan Governor Manuel Zarate inaugurated the building as a hotel, which it continues to be today.
In the original chapel, there is now a cultural area dedicated to the exhibition of paintings and photography, as well as arts and crafts and the live presentation of the Guelaguetza. There is a hydraulic system known as the laundry, which served this purpose for the nuns in their time. In the dining room there is an exquisite mural designed by architect Mario Bourget, composed of pictures which were found in the construction and which held wine in times gone by.
The Macedonia Alcala Theater. In honor of the prestigious musician Macedonia Alcala, composer of the Oaxacan hymn God Never Dies, construction was initiated on this cultural site the 4th of August 1904. The theater was inaugurated on September the 5th, 1909, during the Porfirio Diaz era. Initially, it was called the Luis Mayer y Terán Theater. In 1912, the name changed to the Jesus Carranza Theater, and in 1933, it was given the name Macedonia Alcala. In the entrance can be viewed stairs and banisters of white marble in a magnificent Louis XV hall.
On the stage curtain, a picture is painted of the Parthenon, Mount Parnassus, and among the clouds the chariot of Apollo, pulled by spirited horses and surrounded by the 9 muses. In the central part are represented important historical figures related to the arts, such as Phileas, Dante, Virgil, Beethoven, Michelangelo, and Raphael. On the wall panels are portraits of Victor Hugo, Molière, Wagner, Calderón de la Barca, Giuseppe Verdi, Juan Ruiz de Alarcón, Racine, and Shakespeare. And in the center of the arch is a bust of Mier y Terán.
The auditorium is in the French style in the form of a horseshoe, with orchestra seats, ground floor, tier boxes, and gallery. In the upper part of the auditorium, there's an impressive mural of the Temple of Art and the allegories of fame and fortune.
In this cultural center, Oaxacan society has witnessed all types of artistic expression. At this time, the theater is undergoing a thorough remodeling so that it can be admired at its best.
Museum of Contemporary Art is located on the tourist corridor and was founded as a result of the need to exhibit the works of Oaxacan artists. It's headed by Señor Francisco Toledo, internationally renowned painter and proud Oaxaqueño. The large 18th century house was restored to its original state by the National Heritage Office of the government. In 1986, it was inaugurated as the Museum of Oaxaca by Governor Jesus Martinez. Earlier, this museum's objective was to show the development of the city from its beginnings to modern times, based on information from models, plans, photographs, and antique objects that unraveled the history of the city of Oaxaca.
The two-storied building with a Baroque facade contains 3 patios. The first patio is surrounded by 3 balconies whose roofs rest on stone pillars and arches. In the galleries, works by Oaxacan painters like Rufino Tamayo, Francisco Gutierrez, Rodolfo Nieto, Francisco Toledo, Rodolfo Morales, and Sergio Hernandez can be admired. Works by foreign artists like The Arch of Time by Cayoto Ota and the Mural of Cardboard created by artist Frederick Amat also delight us. It is this Museum of Contemporary Art, a fertile ground for artists, which has disseminated our rich culture around the world.
Santo Domingo de Guzman. The construction of Santo Domingo was begun in 1570 by the Spaniards and was completed in 1666, that is, 94 years later, in spite of the fact that according to the size of the project, they were to have constructed it in a 20-year period. The complex consists of a church, convent, processional corridors, chapels, dining hall, kitchen, botanical garden, hospice, areas for the novitiates, and an orchard.
The facade consists of 3 parts and a top section. In each of the sections are found fluted columns with Corinthian finials. On the bottoms of the cornices can be seen ornamentation and seraphim. In the niches between the columns there are important figures of the Dominican order. In the center of the second section a high-relief image stands out of Saint Dominique Guzman and Saint Hippolytus Martyr, supporting in their hands a church symbolizing the Diocese of Oaxaca, above which there is a representation of the Holy Spirit. On the top section there are 3 female figures. In the center, Charity, on the left, Faith, and on the right, Hope, represented by an anchor.
The church is formed by a nave with lateral and cryptocollateral chapels that act as buttresses to withstand the movements of the earth. It was necessary to have a firm foundation because, in this era, neither cement nor reinforcement rods were used as they are today. The nave proper is a barrel vault, decorated with wall panels and paintings representing scenes from the life of the Virgin Mary and from the Old Testament. All this in Renaissance style, gilded stucco in high relief. In addition, there are side murals and large multicolored stained glass windows.
In the vault of the lower choir, there is a relief showing the genealogical tree of the Guzman family, which grows out of the chest of Don Feliz Guzman and spreads in the form of leaves, flowers, and human fruit until it ends with a representation of the earthly life of the Virgin Rosario. On the columns which support the lower choir, there are images of the founders of the Dominican order, such as Friar Juan de Cordoba, who wrote the first Zapotec Spanish dictionary, Friar Francisco de Burgoa, who directed the interior decoration of the church, in addition to being the first graduate of the Dominican University, and Friar Julian Garces, signing a document sent to the King of Spain testifying that the indigenous people were human beings. In the vault of the lower choir, the earthly brothers of Saint Dominic are represented, and in the vault of the upper choir, his spiritual brothers.
Andres de la Concha, celebrated colonial painter, painted the principal altarpiece in 1612, but it was destroyed by Lieutenant Colonel Martinez Rivera in 1869 in order to remove the gold. The altarpiece that we enjoy today is a reconstruction inspired in the church of Yanuitlan. It was begun March the 6th, 1956 and completed in 1959. On the top, the Holy Spirit and the Virgin of Rosario are represented. In the center of the third section, St. Francis of Assisi is flanked by St. Andrew, St. Philip, St. Teresa, and St. Ines. In the center of the second section, St. Dominic Guzman is shown with St. Thomas of Aquinas and St. Albert the Great at his sides. On the first level, the Most Holy Throne is surrounded by St. Bartholomew, St. Thomas, St. Peter, and St. Paul.
The Chapel of the Rosary was inaugurated in 1731, and its decoration deals with advances in the art education of the indigenous. On the left wall, we see the panels of the Sorrowful Mysteries. On the right, the Joyful Mysteries, and in the choir, the Glorious Mysteries. In the center of the altarpiece is seen Our Lady of Rosario with an enormous crown made by the inspired goldsmith Jose Maria Ortiz. At the top, the Virgin of Rosario holds the baby Jesus in her arms, and St. Dominic Guzman and St. Catherine of Siena are seen kneeling. On the end panels, we find images of St. Anne and St. Joaquin. On the side walls, there are impressive oil paintings of the archangels.
The Regional Museum of Oaxaca is located in a section of the ex-convent of Santo Domingo. The pieces that stand out in this museum are the treasures of Monte Alban's tomb number 7, which were discovered by archaeologist Alfonso Caso, his wife Maria Lombardo, and his associates Juan Valenzuela, Martin Bazan, and Senora Guzman on January the 9th, 1932.
The convent cloister of Santo Domingo is an impressive 2 stories, which contain processional walkways around a fountain of quarry stone. Its roof is supported by ribbed vaults and robust support columns. On its walls there are still vestiges of the original painting, which have survived the passage of time and which were respected during the restorations of the building. Wall, vault, and corridor restoration added up to more than 1,500 meters in 1995 and 1996 alone.
In the eastern part of the convent, that is to say behind it, at first are found the hospice and the area for the novitiates. These were occupied by the 18th Battalion of the Mexican Army Infantry during the last decades. but in 1997 are in the last stages of remodeling for the benefit of Oaxaqueños and visitors.
The Carmen Alto Church was sited at the end of Garcia Vigil Street, a strategic location like the valley of Oaxaca itself, from which previously the center of the city of Oaxaca was seen. On this site, around the year 1500, the Aztecs living in Oaxaca constructed a temple, or teocalli, dedicated to the goddess Centeotl, the goddess of corn, on the orders of the Emperor Ahuitzotl. The festival of Centeotl was celebrated in the Aztec year 13 Tecpal, which is in July of our calendar and is now recognized by the festivities of Carmen Alto.
On top of this Aztec temple, the Hermitage of La Santa Veracruz was constructed by the Spaniards. Years later, as it lay abandoned and in ruins, it was granted to the Barefoot Carmelite friars by Bishop Thomas Monteroso. The Carmelites constructed the church, which we admire today, in 1669, with the help from the Portuguese philanthropist Manuel Fernandez Fialho, in whose memory a city street was named. The floor plan of the church has the form of the Latin cross and is oriented toward the west. To the south are found the chapel of Santa Teresita de Jesus. In the center of the principal altar is found the image of the Virgin of Mount Carmel.
In the atrium were buried the remains of various Oaxacan heroes like Jose Palacios and Felipe Tinoco, who were shot to the north of the Benito Juarez market. The street Tinoco y Palacios was named in their honor. All the remains were deposited in the chapel of the cathedral by the order of General Jose Maria Morelos on December 4th, 1812.
La Soledad. In general, the architectural complex known as La Plaza de la Danza is the location of many grand events of the city. For example, El Banistui Gulal, or History of the Mondays on the Hill, the cultural Sundays and diverse festivals of the Oaxacan people. Governor Eduardo Vasconcelos indicated this series of constructions in 1950.
Es la hora del almuerzo y se forman grupos que se sientan en rondas y comienzan a hacer su agosto las vendedoras de los calientitos tamales de hoja de plátano y totomostle.
This architectural group is formed by the ex-convent of the Augustine Harvesting Nuns, which today is occupied by the city government building. Previously, it was used as an industrial technical school, a correctional institution for minors, a mixed teachers' college for professors, and the offices of the State Attorney General.
The San Jose Church, father of the Universal Church. The School of Fine Arts of the Benito Juarez University fosters artists in all branches of contemporary art. In past times, it has been a convent for Spanish Capuchin nuns, a shelter for the needy, and quarters for the mounted police. The Garden of Socrates, a meeting place for passers-by, tourists, lovers, and devourers of sweets. Above all, ice cream.
The most imposing architecture of the Plaza de la Danza is the minor Basilica of Nuestra, Senora de la Soledad, which was built on this site according to the following legend. Under the arrival of the Spanish, there was an Aztec military garrison under the orders of Emperor Ahuitzotl. On the highest part of the Tanina y Aluani Hill, today the 14 Hill. The families of the warriors lived on the site of the present-day Soledad complex.
There existed, and still exists, a rock from which water gushed, and it was considered sacred by the indigenous people, and the Spanish constructed a hermitage in this place in order to establish a good relationship with the people. Years later, a muleteer found a strange mule among his own, and as it was passing the sacred rock, it fell dead. Upon examining its load, a carved head and hands were discovered with an inscription at the foot of a cross that said, Nuestra, Senora de la Soledad. This was understood to be a miracle, and the bishop ordered the image of the Virgin to be kept in the hermitage, and through the centuries, Nuestra, Senora de la Soledad has been the patron saint of the city of Oaxaca. The Virgin is venerated every December the 18th.
The construction of the church began in 1682 and was completed in 1818 with the fortune of Don Pedro Otalora y Carvajal. The temple has a facade in a folding screen style, flanked on both sides by square structures of green quarry stone, on which rest towers adorned with Corinthian columns, topped by mosaic domes. The facade is constructed of yellow quarry stone to set it off from the rest of the building. In the center of the facade, there is a high relief of the Virgin Mary of Hinojos at the foot of a cross. The Virgin's face illustrates the effort necessary in creating an impeccable work of art.
The arches of Xochimilco are all that are left of an impressive and costly aqueduct system of potable water for the city. The water was channeled from its source in San Felipe del Agua. The arches are found in the first street of Garcia Vigil and Soloto, which is the dividing line between Santo Tomas, Xochimilco, and the city of Oaxaca.
The aqueduct was constructed in the 18th century by Don Justo Alcántara and Don Justo de la Vega, with the resources of Juan Gomez Marquez and Captain Manuel Landeta, although it would not have been completed if the financing had not been supplemented by Don Juan de Pascua y O'Brien. Today there exists a popular market named in his honor, Sanchez Pascua.
The arches are the remains of the aqueduct system in an area known as Las Cascadas, in a colonia of the same name. Along the San Felipe Road, these walls still tell of their history and have been respectfully preserved, although they are located on a heavily traveled artery in a city school zone. Oaxaca, capital of history.